Amanda. I'm actually based in Scotland, but do a lot of work in Wales. And in terms of this event, I'm coming along as the lead auditor for the Plant Healthy Certification Scheme, which is a plant health and biosecurity scheme for tree and plant nurseries across the UK, also gardens, garden centres, etc., etc. So, and I also audit for UK ISG, which is the Woodland Trust Scheme that has an element of biosecurity in it as well as the provenance part of it. As Jane said, I'm going to get you to do a little bit of work in this to get everybody active, ready for the start of the week. So you will need pens and papers at some point. But first of all, I'm going to just do a brief introduction to biosecurity and on nurseries. And it's not just tree, I've got tree nurseries in the title, but it isn't just tree nurseries. It applies to plant nurseries and also quite a lot of other work that you might be doing, so tree seed collection or etc., etc. So I think everybody's from different organisations. Andrew, you're the only one that I don't know where you're from. Do you want to just open up your mic and tell us where you're from? Are you there, Andrew?
He might be shy, Amanda. He might not want to be recorded.
I'm never shy. I'm just eating breakfast.
Or eating breakfast.
Yeah. Gurdybro Gardens in McCunliffe.
Right. Okay.
Other things as well around, including trees, and the idea
Great.
of orchards, etc., etc. Okay.
Fantastic. Well, this will be a perfect fit for you as well then, hopefully. And as Jane said, if you pop any questions in the chat, but we will be sort of opening up all of our mics in a while just to talk through some parts of the presentation. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen, hopefully. Right. Jane, if you could just let me know that's come up okay.
Yep, that's working fine.
Great. Okay, super. So what we're going to look at today is, and you'll have to excuse me because I'm looking at two screens, so I'm not looking at you now, I'm looking at the other screen, so I know what I'm talking about. So today we're looking at the prevention, control and management of biosecurity risks for tree nurseries, gardens, garden centres, plant health generally. I'll just point out the two photographs on the right hand side. So the top photograph on here, if you can see my mouse, is of an olive plantation in France, sorry. And this is showing the devastating effects that pests and disease can have. This is due to Xylella, which is a bacterial infection that has innumerable host species. It's not in the UK yet, but it shows what can happen. It can affect all sorts of plants like lavender, rosemary, olives, etc., etc., etc. And it's a wee aphid-like bug that looks a bit like it looks a bit like cuckoo spit. So it's very hard to identify as well, but it's really risky in terms of being brought into the UK, particularly by people going on holiday, bringing back olive plants, rosemary plants, or buying them from garden centres that have purchased them and imported them directly from places like Italy, France, areas where it's present. The bottom one is a picture of a very cute Asian long-horned beetle that can have a devastating effect on our environment also. And it's crawling out of a log there, but the first known infestation of this one was in somebody's headboard. They heard a noise scratching about and turned out it was an Asian longhorn beetle that had been imported in the headboard. So you can see they can come in different ways. And in many different forms, from bacteria to fungi to actual pests, insect pests. So this talk, a workshop, is all about assessing risk. And Nursery biosecurity in particular, as well as garden centre biosecurity, is critical to help prevent the introduction and the movement of these harmful pests and disease into our natural environment. You can see the devastating effect that Clara ash dieback has had over the last few years, where we're losing all of quite a lot of our ash across the landscape. So it's critical that we try and reduce these pests and disease from actually getting there in the first place. The way we do that is by determining the pathways that they might use, then assessing the risk that they present, and then finding ways of controlling or mitigating against those risks. So just a brief introduction in terms of this before I get you doing any work yourselves. So the definition, a general definition of biosecurity is the measures taken which aim to prevent the introduction and or spread of harmful pest and disease, either intentionally or unintentionally, because people don't do it deliberately most of the time. It's unintentional. They either don't understand, or they've done it by accident because it's come in back in when they've been abroad or bought something from abroad or moved from one place to another. And there's just a little graph on this slide to show how the incidence of tree and pest disease outbreaks has increased exponentially since the 1970s. You can see that there's more and more being identified as coming in. So this is probably a combination of multiple factors. There's better ways of monitoring them and actually establishing that they are here and recording of the incidence of them, but also people are traveling about a lot more and there's a lot more of us, so there's more chance of them coming into our into the country. And also we've got climate change to bring into this, which can have an impact on the health of our plants and trees in the environment, which then increases the risk of them actually succumbing to a particular pest or disease. So looking at the pathways, the common pathways, the most common pathway for notifiable plant pests to be introduced to a new area is the movement of live plants. So a notifiable pest or a disease is one that we haven't got yet, but we don't want to get it. So there's a list on DEFRA's Plant Health Risk Register that details all of these notifiable pests. They're not here yet, but we absolutely do not want them. So that's something like Xylella is on that list. And this movement can be from propagation material, so cuttings and seeds and plants, through to the trade and movement of that material, to the propagation facility, the growing, the trade and movement of them when they're sold, and plants in the landscape. So all of these parts of the pathway are subject to pest and disease, every single one of them. And that includes the growers, the professionals, the traders, the retailers, the arborists, the landscapers, right the way through to the public gardens and the people that use the public gardens. But in reality, over 80% of our plants, that's in volume and value, that we buy and use in the UK. So all of these plants that you see in B&Q, garden centres, online, are from international sources. So you can see we've got quite high risks coming in because 80% of them are being imported, which is a high risk thing to do anyway. But plants and pests and diseases spread via national as well as international supply chains. So you mustn't become complacent and think just because you're not importing that there isn't a risk. They do spread locally and nationally as well. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about a particular site, which might be your site. So it might be your garden, it might be your nature reserve, it might be your tree nursery, your plant nursery, it might be your garden at home. It could be anywhere. And what we're looking at is doing a site pest risk analysis. So we're going to analyze all of the risks associated with a particular area. I'm going to focus on a nursery for this, but it's applicable for any of those other things as well. So we're looking at the site, and the boundaries of that site. We're looking at the plants, the type of plants that are in the garden or you handle or you grow. We're looking at identification of the pests that those plants may be food for, so to speak. We're going to map the pest pathways. We're going to check the level of unmitigated risk, put controls in place to manage that risk, and then that's going to give us an appropriate level of protection as best as we can. It's our best bet on the level of protection we can give that site. Then what you do next is you monitor it to make sure that your controls are working or if anything's changed, and you go round and round in this big circle, self-assessment and review, continually improving or changing as the situation changes to make sure that you keep that appropriate level of protection in place as best as you can. It's a bit like health and safety management, but for plants. So the first thing we're going to talk about, so have a think yourselves, because in a minute you're going to need to either, if you're not doing it yet, think of what you're going to be doing and look at susceptible plant hosts. A list, so you produce the first thing you would do is you would produce a list of the plants that you're growing or managing or you have on site. You have in your garden, you have on your nature reserve, you have in your nursery or your garden centre. And you would check to see if there are any relevant notifiable or quarantine pests and or disease that may present a risk to those plants you grow. And Jane will give you a copy of this presentation so that you can follow these links. So these two links here with the plant health portal in particular gives you a list of all the notifiable, quarantine and priority pests and diseases. There are other resources you can use. One of them is Plant Healthy. You can use Forest Research, their pest and disease information as well. Woodland Trust's got quite a lot of information too, to find out what pests and diseases may have an impact on your particular circumstances. So we've briefly talked about this. So a notifiable pest or disease is one that is required to be reported to the government by law. And these include pests and diseases which have the potential to cause the greatest damage to our environment, and you have a duty to report them. So in Wales, that would be to NRW. They're subject to statutory control, and the only way to remove the risk is to destroy the plant. So if you suspected you'd got a notifiable pest or disease, you would contact NRW, or if it's a tree one, you could go through Tree Alert and ask a plant health inspector would check to see if it is. They would take away a sample and send it off to the lab and check it is notifiable. If it is, they will ask you to destroy it, and that will be by burning or bagging and tying and sending to landfill. So you will be asked to destroy all of the plants that have that notifiable pest or disease. So you can see again that you want to reduce the chance of you getting these, because this could destroy your business. If you were going one particular plant and it was had an impact with a notifiable pest, your business could be wiped out completely because you'd have to destroy the whole lot. It may not be, but it may have implications for other plants as well. So I'm just going to go through briefly one of these that has implications for not just one species, but a broad range. So for example, Phytophthora ruborum, which is you probably know this from larch, where people have removed lots of larch across Wales. This one is a notifiable plant disease that affects actually 150 different types of plant. So it's not just the one that it infects. Phytophthora canovi is another one, and again that doesn't just affect one type of plant. It affects lots of others. So these Phytophtheras are blighters. So here's just some examples of trees that Phytophthora ramorum can infect. And this is obviously limited because there are 150. So there's larch, chestnut, western hemlock, Douglas fir, horse chestnut, red oak, torquay oak, beech, holm oak. So you can see there's a huge range. So if you were focusing on any of these species and you got Phytophthora on your nursery, you'd be very worried. Phytophthora canovii, again, another Phytophthora, you can again see the range of species. So if you go through all the Phytophtheras, they probably cover most of the species you might ever want to grow or have in a nursery or a garden. So this is just a brief overview to give you an idea of this is a hint. So it's to give you an idea of the types of ways that these pests can spread. So Phytophtheras are fungus-like organisms. They're water molds, which cause root and stem decay, which then goes up the tree and eventually kills it. So it starts to make it sick to start with, but can eventually kill it. And it can also make the tree so unhealthy that other pests and diseases use it as an easy target as well. So Phytophtheras are tiny, tiny spores that swim in water films between soil particles. But it's super clever because it can also produce thick-walled spores that are released from those decaying roots, which can actually stay in the soil for over a decade. It also can spread, so these swimming spores can spread through runoff, watering plants, rivers, streams, and they can even come in through the air. So they can come in water droplets and moisture through the air, and they can affect soil and container-grown plants as well as plants in the ground at any time of the year. So you can see it's quite diverse. So I chose this one because it does absolutely everything and uses absolutely every single pathway that you might want to consider when you're looking at a site. So what do we do when we assess risk? It's the same as when you assess risk for health and safety, as I said, but for a human. You carry out an assessment of all the relevant pathways that pests and disease might use to arrive and move around your site. So it's like when you stop at the edge of a road and you assess how you're going to get across the road. Are you going to use a bike? Are you going to walk? Are you going to use a scooter to get across the road? What is the level of risk? What is the level of risk of using one of those methods to get across the road? What is the level of risk that the plants are going to be infected by through one of those pathways? And what measures can you put in place to mitigate or reduce those risks? What controls can you use? And then how much of the controls minimize that level of risk? So crossing the road, you check both ways and make sure you can get across. So monitoring, so you assess, you monitor, you review, you update, you assess. So it's a continual cycle of events, monitoring and checking. Right, so this is the time you need your pen and papers. So we've got a map here of, it's a very large nursery, but it's the only one I could find of an overhead picture of a nursery that's got a nice layout. So your nurseries, your sites are not probably going to be this big. So what have we got here? We've got water, we've got a big lagoon, we've got all of these trees and hedges around it, we've got people using polytunnels, we've got open growing areas, we've got a road, we've got a way in, we've got a car park, we've got dispatch areas, we've got goods in areas, we've got a whole load of wood and wood packaging over here, we've got a big waste area over here. So what I want you to do is to list all of the ways that you think that pests and diseases could arrive on this nursery and leave it. And I'm going to give you 5 minutes and then we're going to open up our mics and have a little bit of a discussion. So 5 minutes from now, 1 minute past 11. If you've got any questions about that, just open up your mic and ask now. silence means that I've either sent you to sleep or you're okay.
Probably busy writing, Amanda.
Hopefully.
Do you want to maybe list some of the things again, just so people like
Ah, no,
what's
no.
this bit? No, you don't want to list anymore.
No, 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 no. Want people to look at it and think about the pathways.
Okay.
Have we lost Andrew? No. You're there. Got you.
I'm here.
Yeah, I see you. I've not got my screen big enough to see who's here still. I have now. Just going to give you one more minute and then we'll go round and get some ideas of the pathways you've thought about. Okay. So this is a really useful exercise. If you can get overhead photographs, you could use those. If you can't, you could map out your site and mark the pathways on, just to get you thinking about your layout of your nursery as well as what you're doing on the site. So we'll go round and I'll ask you each for one of the pathways, and then we'll work out whether we've covered them all, and then we'll go into each pathway in detail. So Jess, what pathway did you think about?
I thought maybe on pallets.
Good one. Very good. Yep. Helen?
Oh, hi. So associated with that, I thought of transportation.
Yep.
Maybe maybe the container hasn't been cleaned out from the
No,
previous
just one.
transportation.
Perfect.
And maybe it's just come in inadvertently,
Yep.
as you mentioned previously.
Yep. That's great. Thanks, Helen. And is it Jenny?
Yes, it
Yes,
is.
Jenny.
By people through their clothes and their gloves and their shoes.
Perfect. Sarah?
There's also an element of birds and small mammals passing through the site as well.
Yep. Great. That's a really good one. A lot of people miss that one. Andrew?
Yep, surrounding fields and what else is going on in the vicinity. The
Fantastic.
range as well.
Great. Izzy?
I got tools.
Brilliant. Okay, so I think between you, you've got pretty much all of them. You've missed the one of the critical ones, but we'll go on to that in a bit more detail in a minute. So in terms of assessing the level of risk, it's really just exactly the same as you would do any other risk assessment for anything at all. So you look at the likelihood of the risk occurring, and you look at the consequences or the impact of that risk. And in this case, it's the impacts of pest entry, establishment of spread. So it's in terms of the likelihood, highly likely, likely, unlikely, or highly unlikely, and then high, medium, or low to give you the colour scores. Right, so we're going to go through each of these things that you've already told me about in a bit more detail. Site boundaries, this one was yours, Andrew, wasn't it? So you're spot on. The wider environment around the nursery, the hedges, whether it's woodland, farmland, gardens, other businesses, what's in the around the area, garden centres. Is there a garden centre next to you that imports all of its plants from Italy? Have you gone in and had a look at the labels and seen where they've come from? And this is, Andrew, you're quite right. This is really important because when you do the risk assessment, when you're looking at the likelihood and you're looking at the assessment of the risk of anything going wrong, this is a high level of risk because pest and disease can move across landscapes into your nursery through the air. And in many other ways. So if you've got if you've got lots of a woodland with lots of rhododendron in it on your boundary, and it's got Phytophthora ramorum, and you're growing trees that are susceptible to it, it can have a huge impact on what you're doing. So what you would do is you would go around and assess, you'd look at the landscape. You can do that with Google Maps, you can do it with Earth, you can walk around, you can have a drive around, and you'd map that out and look at the surrounding environment to see if it is growing anything that might have an implication on the nursery. So have you got fire blight in the hedges around you? Do you grow hedging plants? So you assess what you're growing against what's in the wider environment and see if you think there's going to be a risk from anything coming in from that environment. And really, the only thing you can do to control that, because you have no control over what everybody else is doing on your boundaries and out with your area, the only thing you can do is carry out inspections and keep your eye open and keep records to see what's going on, because you can't really control that in any other way. But what you can control is where you grow things on site. So if there's a particular pest or disease that moves very locally and you grow a plant that on your site that may be susceptible, you might consider growing it over the other side of the nursery, or you might consider growing it in a protected area so that it's not going to be impacted by that wider environment issue. So that was a really good one, Andrew. Thank you. Is everybody happy with that? Does anybody want to ask any questions about the wider environment one? No, good. That's quite an obvious one, I think. So the next one, people. Who was it that mentioned people? Was that you, Jenny? I can't remember now who mentioned people.
Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
I did.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
people
So
as in boots, gloves, and clothing.
that's it. That's spot on. So the different types of people you could get coming on are staff, volunteers, visitors, contractors, the general public, depending on what you're doing. They could have come from absolutely anywhere. They could have been taking their dog for a walk in the woods, and they could have been Phytophthora in those woodlands. Phytophthora, not only are they have they got multiple pathways, they're also very difficult to get off things. So Forest Research did a research project on mountain bike wheels in Scotland through woodlands where Phytophthora was found, and they found that even by washing the tires of the bikes, the spores were still adhered to the bike wheels, so they can stick quite easily to tire treads, and so can other pests and diseases. So again, Jenny, you're quite right. It's having systems in place. It's a medium risk, but the key is to come in clean boots, encourage people to come in clean boots. If you can't, then or in addition, you could have foot baths, mats, sprays. You can ask people in advance to come in. You can ask them to come to reception area. You can map out with signage to say, please come into our area, into the site with clean boots, or please come to reception before going on the site. You can ask staff to change into work boots when they get on into the car park, and change into their work boots, so they're coming in with clean boots. They've not taken the dog for a walk first and then come straight onto the nursery site. And you can just make sure everything is kept as clean as possible. It's not going to eliminate it, but it's reducing that risk. So you can get mats and baths. What would you think the key thing with a foot bath would be to have with it? What sort of foot bath would you use?
Myself, I like to have one where you can immerse at least all of the bottom of the boot in it. And I'm always a little bit worried about what to put in it as like the disinfectant.
Yeah,
We're quite near water sources.
yeah.
And I think
So
people went right back to like ye olde J's fluid, but I'm not sure if that's the best or not.
no, it's not. So the Forestry Commission don't recommend it. However, if you look at their website and go over it, they've got Clean Kill for Forestry on it.
Okay.
And the key thing is where you're disposing of that water. How often do you clean it, and have you got a lid on it?
I haven't got a lid on it. No, it was just a wash through. Yeah, it's for people walk through. No,
Okay.
so it's probably topped up by rainwater whenever we have rain. Obviously, that was like 2024. And yeah, it's just out of the stream water we use.
Okay. So you're using stream water, which is high risk.
Yeah.
You haven't got a lid, which you could
No.
have, because you're diluting it with rainwater. And where do you pour it away afterwards?
Well, I think because we've just got like the J fluid on it. It just comes home, but it
Right.
normally evaporates by the time we do
Yeah.
that. Actually, at the moment.
So I was discussing this with the head of policy on plant health from DEFRA at a site once, and we reckoned as long as the water could soak away and didn't go immediately into a watercourse, it was okay, because by the time it got down to the water level, it would be fine. But it really is site specific. I think your idea of pouring it down the drains is the best. Because
we're all on soakaways where we are, so it's going in the ground at some point. It's not going into anything mains.
It's not going into mains, no. So going into mains would be best, because then it would be treated at the mains sewage. But if it can't, you have to use your common sense. But covering it up with a board or something is useful, because diluting it is not. It's not going to work.
Okay.
And then using an appropriate cleaner. So another one you can use is Propeller. However, that does apparently, and I know it does, it rots the vibram on the bottom of your boots. So it's difficult to use. Garden centres and things like that, it's difficult because people don't want to wear their nice shoes and put them in a footbath. So there are places that use mats, which are less offensive to some people, and people don't notice them so much. But again, you have to make sure they're cleaned regularly and it's topped up, because they can dry out, they can get flooded out. However, if you've got a garden centre, then you quite often, if you look at people's shoes, quite often they're wearing high heels or really nice tidy shoes. So it's unlikely that they'll have gone for a walk in a wood with something on, but not that doesn't completely remove the risk. So you have to look at the type of people you're getting on site and assess what you can do to make things work and do the best you can in terms of having sprays or foot baths. But if you do have foot baths, you need to make sure, even if it's only a board, that you cover it up. Otherwise it's diluted, and just wash where you're tipping it away.
Okay, right, yep. Thank you.
Anybody else got any other questions on people? Okay. Right, vehicles. Who was it that said vehicles? Is that you, Helen?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Can I just ask Amanda just about the last,
Yeah, sure.
the last point? If this was a community growing space, or a community garden, or a community woodland space, do you think that the mats, as you know, they became really familiar during foot and mouth disease, do you think that that would be appropriate for an area which is accessible to the public, which is going to be a lot less monitored?
No, you can. And one of the things you could do for that is you can talk to people, and the Forestry Commission have, if you Google Forestry Commission Keep It Clean, you'll come up with a whole load of images for some posters they created that are really not scary, so it doesn't look like you're going into an area that's got a nuclear disaster on it in terms of biosecurity. Yeah, they've got little dog paw prints and things like that over it, and it's Keep It Clean, and you can print them off and laminate them and pin them to notice boards to try and encourage people to go into woods with clean footwear, or volunteers. So you might need to take a softer touch, and in going into a community woodland, you can talk to your community group, you could have meetings, you can have events and talk to them about it. So talking to people about it, and these signs, which are really quite nice and not scary, put up on notice boards, really help.
Thank you. The other question, just very quickly, sorry. In this kind of area, which is meant to be open for, you know, families and so, would you generally recommend keeping dogs out unless they were service dogs or helping dogs?
No, again, you can't really expect people to keep dogs out of community woodland sites.
Yeah,
Because
I have actually seen signs with no dogs allowed.
yeah, it depends on whether there's an issue with the usual problem with dogs is people not clearing up the dog poo afterwards. But we can't stop people from walking dogs in community woodlands, really. But you can, if you've got a tree nursery, a community tree nursery, you could then, because you can restrict their access. And just a point with respect to the mats and dogs, I've been trying to find out, and we can't find out for sure whether it's safe for dogs to walk over mats that have been covered in chemicals, because you wouldn't want them licking the paws afterwards.
No.
So you need to consider all these sorts of things as well when you're using mats. So if you are having dogs on site, or if you just want to talk to people more about the reasons why you want to keep it clean and why they should wash their boots before they come.
Thank you.
Or if you've got lots of people that have got dogs coming on site, you could have just plain water for them to walk through to try and reduce mud, because the spores quite often stick in mud.
Okay, so plain water.
Yeah, so you just need to, and then make sure you pour that away somewhere down a drain again, because you don't want to have your foot baths or your water that you're using that might contain a pest or disease poured down somewhere, that it's going to have an implication for the nursery. So you might want to pour that down a drain as well.
Okay, so back into the mains.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so in terms of vehicles, there's all sorts of vehicles that you might get on a site. You've got your delivery and collection vehicles. You've got staff and visitor and volunteer cars or minibuses. You've got tractors and other vehicles and machinery that you might use on site. And sometimes you might bring a chipper onto the site to do some chipping or wood chip, or chip the surrounding woodland on your site to use on the nursery. Again, the level of risk of this is medium, but it can be high depending on where they've been, because the vehicles may have been on high risk sites. So your delivery vehicles may have been on high risk sites. Chippers are a bit of a nightmare because the bigger chippers in particular you can't clean the inside of. So if they've been chipping in a woodland that's got Phytophthora or ash or dieback or any other pest or disease, or some of the ones that we're seeing coming in now, if you're growing conifers like Ips typographus, if they're chipping the bark of, if they're chipping spruce and come on your site, even though they may have cleaned the wheels, you can't clean the inside of a chipper. So they could be bringing pest and disease on the inside of a chipper. So chip again is something you need to be a bit more careful of. Tractors and vehicles you use on site, you've got much more control over because you can wash the wheels yourself and make sure they're kept clean. Staff and visitor cars, what do you think would be the best thing to do with cars that come to the site? What would you do? Anybody got any ideas?
You could, I have actually been in a situation, you can drive over that mat. I remember that. Yeah, that's one thing that springs to mind. Or keep it in a very restricted car parking area, and have it fenced off, which is what we've done recently, actually.
Yeah, so that's two good points there. So that you can get the mats you can drive over, but they're not very effective. And they're expensive and they're difficult to clean. But the best bet is just to keep them to a specific area, particularly one that's not going to drain into your site. So there's no waterborne pathogens can drain into the site from the car parking area. So hardcore, so it drains straight away, or tarmac areas that can be washed off or sloped the other way, but just restricting them and stopping them before the growing areas is what most people do. So we've got restricting access and vehicle cleaning facilities. So some sites will have special vehicle cleaning areas as well, where they will, particularly some of the bigger ones where they've got vehicles moving a lot between sites, they'll have a vehicle washing area where they'll be able to drive onto a concrete pad and spray off the vehicles with high pressure hoses, which then go down into tanks that are filtered and then collected and taken away and disposed of. But those are really big sites that tend to do that. And tools and equipment. Who was it that mentioned tools and equipment?
That was me.
That's great. Another good one, Izzy. So it's a medium risk as well, but the risk there is moving it across your site, because you're likely to use the tools and equipment on the site and not move them off, because it would be a pain to keep moving them off site and on site, unless you've got nowhere secure to keep them, of course. And then it's cleaning and disinfecting them. Particularly things if you're doing cuttings like snippers and things like that, where you don't want to, where you're snipping one set of cuttings and then moving on to a different batch or a different species. It's cleaning in between and cleaning at the end of the day. And this is where you can use things like J's or Jet 5 as a disinfectant, because those are easy to use. And quite a lot of people use the wipes as well, although I don't think that's particularly environmentally friendly. Although disinfectants aren't particularly environmentally friendly either, but I think the wipes are probably a little bit worse because you've got to dispose of the wipe as well then. So that's a really basic one, and it's cleaning the things as best as you can and keeping them clean. Pallets and packaging, who was it that mentioned that one?
That was me.
Okay, thanks, Jess. Yeah, that's a really good one. So this is where if you're importing, it's critical. So anything that comes in on pallets, you should always check to make sure they've got the heat stamp. Has everybody seen these on pallets? So that means they've been, this is a heat stamp, which means that the wood that the pallet was the pallet was made of, or the pallet itself as a whole, was heat treated to a high temperature to kill off any pest or disease that is in the pallet. So it's been heat treated before it comes in. So it's particularly important if you import, but you can also see these stamps sometimes on pallets that move across the UK. So you can feel a little bit more comfortable that the pallet is safe. And in the same way, if you're using packaging, quite a lot of packaging may have been heat treated, which means that there's less chance of pests and diseases being associated with it. So, and that's another little picture of the emerald ash borer again, because it is so cute. Not the emerald ash borer, sorry, the Asian longhorn, because it is cute. But it's something you do have to look out for as well, not just the heat stamp. You also need to look out for holes and signs of burrowing in the wood. So it's not just to check for the heat stamp, it's a overall visual inspection of the pallets and packaging to make sure there's no exit or entry holes if it's been across the UK or if it's imported. In terms of the packaging as well, if you had something that you had imported from somewhere else that wasn't a plant, you can also have problems and wrappings as well. So at one point, I've heard of somebody lifting up terracotta pots and finding tarantulas in between the pots. So it's not just the packaging, it's the wrapping that can keep things in as well. So for example, somebody recently, when I did an audit, had imported canes from China, and inside the bag, you could actually see frass, little bits of chewed up bamboo, so that even though they're supposed to have been heat treated, there was obviously something that was still inside the canes before they were unwrapped, so they didn't unwrap them. So it's pallets and packaging and wrapping always give a good visual check, and that's again the only thing you can do is you can visually check it, so you inspect it. This is one everybody missed. So media of all sorts. This is a high risk one. So growing media, compost, perlite, low risk, mediate compost, high risk, gravel, relatively low risk, although somebody did buy some from a builder's merchant and bring in New Zealand flatworm to the site, which is not nice anyway. Sand, low risk, soil, if you're bringing it in, high risk. If it's on your site, low risk. Toppers, bark and coir, all high risk. So I've put high risk here, although some of them are really low risk. So perlite, vermiculite is really innate. So it's very low risk. But all of the others are high risk. So does anybody know why, why coir, for example, is high risk? Has anybody got any idea? Does everybody know what coir is?
Is it because it's imported?
Yeah, it's because it's imported. Do you know what it actually is? What it's made from?
Coconut.
That's right. Do you know what they do to treat it before? Do you know how they make it before it's brought in places like Sri Lanka?
No.
Okay, so basically they mash it all up and they lay it on mud or concrete floors and dry it in the sun. That's it. They don't do anything else to it. So it's really high risk. It's also used quite commonly now as a replacement for peat in compost mixes, which is why it's a risk in terms of compost as well. So in terms of compost and coir, and bark as well, because bark is the same as risk as the chip, where you might have bark bark beetles coming in with the bark. You need to be very careful, and the way round this is asking for evidence from the suppliers as to how they've ensured their products are free from pest and disease. So a lot of the main compost producers now are so used to being asked for this evidence, they produce nice little sheets that tell you what's in the mix and how they heat treat it to make sure it's free from pest and disease. So that's the first thing you can do as a control. You can ask your supplier, what do you do to ensure that what you are supplying me is free from pest and disease? And if they can't do that, it might be worth switching this to a supplier that can do that. So it's inspections, generally inspecting the product as it comes in, and again, getting evidence from suppliers. So those are the key things to do for that. I know we're running out of time, Jane, but I'm getting there. And then plant material. So nobody mentioned plants. So plants, seeds, cuttings, level of risk varies. For imported plants, it's high. And for UK plant seeds and cuttings, it's medium. So again, it's inspections and sourcing plants from the UK as best as possible, and assessing your suppliers' biosecurity procedures. So in just the same way as you would ask your media suppliers, you ask your plant suppliers whether they do carry out any procedures to ensure they are providing you with plants that are free from pest and disease. If you go onto the Plant Healthy website and look at their directory, it gives you a list of all of the gardens and nurseries and suppliers of plants that have become Plant Healthy certified. That means they've had an audit to ensure that their biosecurity risks are low. And if you buy from a UK ISG nursery, again, you've got a little bit of confidence that the risk is low. So you look at your suppliers, look at where you get your plants from, and again, carry out visual inspections, but check out your supplier. So you might want to visit nurseries to check out yourself, if you're buying off another nursery, what it's like. If you're going into a woodland collecting seed, you check to make sure the woodland is free from pest and disease before you collect the seed. And you go in with clean boots, etc., etc. And the same for seeds. Water is another one we missed. So you get your water from lagoons, boreholes, rivers and streams, rains water, and mains water. And again, it's medium to low. Right, so out of which of those do you think is the lowest risk water source?
Mains.
Would that be mains water?
It is mains water, yeah, because that's treated second lowest risk.
Rain.
That's a borehole is a second lowest risk because you're getting it from way down underground. Highest risk ones are rainwater collection is a high risk, rivers and streams are high risk, and a lagoon is a high risk. Any open standing water you have, I call them Phytophthora swimming baths, because if you remember, the oomocytes from Phytophthora can swim. So anything open is a high risk. So if you've got a tank and you're bringing in mains water or borehole water, you need to make sure it's covered. If you're using any other type of water, it's best to put some sort of filter in place, a UV filter. You can add chlorine. There's different things you can do to reduce the risk to your water supply, and you can carry out inspections. You can do water testing. However, most people just test for nutrients and then carry it and use crop monitoring to make sure there's no problems with the irrigation water. You can get little like litmus papers that you can dip in the water that tells you you've got Phytophthora, but it doesn't tell you which one. So you have to send it away to be tested. And if you send it away to be tested yourself, it costs a fortune, and they can only test for one specific type of Phytophthora at a time. So it can be quite costly. Helen, you got a question?
Yes, I have. Yeah, talking about water storage, what about water that's collected in or pumped up from, say, a river source into an IBC tank? Could you use some kind of solar energy to keep that clean or prevent the risk of build-up?
Yeah, you can get if you can attach a UV filter to it. So a UV light can help sterilize it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Is any other questions around about water?
Hi, yeah, sorry,
Yeah.
I didn't quite get why rainwater was high risk or higher risk. I
Because
missed that one.
Phytophthora can come in on rain.
Oh, right, okay, thank you.
So Forest Research, again, I always quote them because they do a lot of research, obviously. They did research across a number of nursery sites, different types from community to large commercial nurseries, and they found Phytophthora in puddles on the nursery that had come in through rainwater that they didn't even know were in the UK.
Oh, wow.
So it's high risk. So rainwater collection, open water butts, if you use dipping tanks for bare root plant trees, some people dip before they send them out to make sure that they're going to stay healthy a bit longer. All of these you need to consider how you manage that water to make sure you can reduce the risk. So in terms of Phytophthora, what you might want to do is look in the wider landscape to see if there's Phytophthora around you. You can check out the Forest Research maps that show you where Phytophthora are, where pests and diseases are currently. They're quite useful. So if you put in pest and disease maps into Forest Research, it'll come up with all the maps of where they know things are at the minute. So you can see where things are in relation to you, so you can assess how risky the water you're using from the point of view of rainwater might be. And also, it may not be a risk if you're not growing plants that are susceptible to them. So you need to sort of cross-reference everything to make sure that what you're doing is the safest for what you're growing in your particular location. Water drainage, again. So it's looking at your tracks, your growing areas, ditches around the site. So this is a medium risk because if you're not very well drained, and when it rains, the whole site floods, or if you've got areas that puddle, again, we've just spoken about puddling where Phytophthora can move. So any waterborne pathogens will move in the water. So if your site floods regularly, or there's areas that become very wet, then the pest and disease could spread quite quickly if it's a waterborne pathogen. So what you do again on this is crop monitoring, making sure that you keep your tracks level, that there's any puddling areas of puddling, you reduce the risk. You can keep your plants off the ground, which is a really great way of ensuring that the waterborne pathogens aren't going to get into the pots and trays. And also it's really good for air pruning anyway as well. So you can keep them off the ground on racks, trays, and you can get these nice little cells now that you can that are pallet size that you can lift up with a forklift if you're a bit bigger, that come on little legs. So there's all sorts of things you can do to reduce the impacts and control the risk from drainage water. And then this is another one nobody mentioned, which is waste. So waste, I've broken it down into two types. So waste plant material is high risk. It should be low risk by the time it gets to the point of waste, technically, because you will have been doing all the other stuff in the first place to control all the other ways that things can get onto your site. And you'll have been monitoring your crops to make sure that they're not falling foul of any pest or disease. They're not showing any signs of it. But inevitably, you will have waste, and there is a chance that there could be spores. If you remember, we spoke about Phytophthora spores. They not only last a long time, they're pretty clever in that they've got a really hard sort of capsule around them, so they're difficult to kill. So they could end up in your plant waste. So there's different ways you get rid of it. You might send it away to landfill, which apparently is really quite good, because it gets covered with other stuff and you lose it in the landfill and it's less likely to get out into the environment. Composting, there's composting on site and there's green waste sites. So sending it away to a green waste site is good because they have to manage the green waste to a particular standard. So they will be checking and monitoring the temperatures of their waste. If you're keeping it on site and composting it on site, you need to make sure that your compost is managed effectively, that it's not going to drain off, the water isn't going to come through and drain off onto the site. So it's position of where your compost pile is and managing it so it achieves the temperatures it should do. And you're turning it regularly to ensure that any pests or diseases are destroyed with the temperatures that is created in your composting procedures. And there's quite a lot of resources on the various websites. There's one on the Plant Healthy website again with composting procedures, how to compost properly. So there's quite a lot of information out there to help you with that. And then burning. If you've got a burn area, it's how you manage that fire. So incinerators are good because you can understand you'll get all the temperature really high in an incinerator. But if you're managing an open fire, you need to make sure that you're watching it, which people will be, but pulling it over from the outside into the hot part, because the temperatures around a fire vary, and the outside of the fire will not be very hot, but the middle of the fire will be very hot. So you need to make sure that you keep on turning the outside bits into the middle so that you destroy any spores if you have to burn it. So again, it's inspecting it, managing suitably, and have a good fire management in place. And then other waste material, your pots, containers, crates, pallets, general waste, medium to high. Don't reuse pots. Don't get people to bring in pots from elsewhere. If you're using them, clean them. If you're not, recycle them, get them taken away by a recycling company to be recycled, and then any pest or disease will be destroyed in that process. So again, it's washing or suitable storage and disposal or burning. And then general waste generally goes to landfill. Crates and pallets that you're suspicious of, you might want to burn. Also, you need to make sure that you've got an appropriate exemption or permit in place if you are burning on site. And then other products, stakes, guards, canes. So again, it's just checking, as we've already mentioned this, checking to make sure they're heat treated, checking to make sure there's nothing in the packaging. And that's it. So I'll stop sharing and...
There was one question from earlier, Amanda.
Okay, yeah, sure, I missed that one.
It's okay. So from Helen, what security, if any, does plant passporting offer?
Okay, so plant passporting is an interesting one. So plant passporting is good because you really handily get a plant health inspector coming out on an annual basis, at least on an annual basis, and they will check. They'll probably do a growing season inspection. So they will go around your nursery and check to make sure you've got no pests and disease on site. And they'll also check to make sure that you are putting appropriate plant passporting mechanisms in place. So your traceability is good, so that you have got the correct labels on, so that people that buy the plants know where they've come from. But traceability is really, really important, because if you've got an outbreak in the landscape, you need to be able to trace that plant back all the way through the stages of growing through to the seed to see where that pest or disease came from. So if you had a problem and you bought it from a nursery, if you bought a plant from a nursery, you should be able to go back, or the plant health inspector should be able to go back to the other nursery, find all the batches of that plant and put a hold on it, in case for the pest or disease for everywhere else that plant has been sold. So it's critical for traceability backwards and forwards to make sure that everybody knows where it's come from. So it's really important and it's useful, but it isn't the be all and end all in terms of your plant health, but you do get the benefit of that inspection from the plant health inspector as well. And there's there's a couple of courses you can do on plant passporting, and they're free online, which are really good that tells you all about plant passporting. And the one of them, you get a little test at the end of it, and you have to get 80% or more to get the certificate, and you can keep retaking it and reading through all the information until you fully understand what plant passporting is all about. So it's really useful to do that. More questions, were there, Jane, or?
Sorry, can I just add
that was it, unless someone else has
Okay.
got any other questions, because we are overrunning on time.
Okay.
could I
Helen,
just
did
add,
you want to
Amanda,
say something else?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't quite catch your email address, Amanda.
Oh, right, sure,
I
yeah.
can't write very quickly.
It's okay. I'll pop it in the chat. But you'll
I'll
get
be
a copy of
sending,
this.
yeah, I'll be
Oh, yes,
sending
you'll
a
get a
copy of the slides
PowerPoint out.
and
Yeah.
some of the so I put together a list of some of the stuff that Amanda was talking about, some of the links. So I popped it in the chat as we've been going along, but I've also popped it in a Word document. So I'll send that along with the presentation afterwards as well. So you've got that, and the feedback form as well. So it's very important we get feedback. So if you wouldn't mind, and you can also sign up to our other courses. So we do have an AFA course later in the year as well, and Amanda's doing an in-person course later in the year for us as well. So you'll get to come and have the opportunity to come and have some in-person training as well.
And it seems quite a lot to start with, but it's just getting your head around everything and mapping out is the first key thing to do. And it isn't scary, and it's not difficult. It's not rocket science. Most of it is just using your common sense and just thinking into detail of exactly what you do, where you're getting things from, and where it's going to.
Okay, thanks, Amanda. I'm going to stop recording now. Thank you, everybody, for coming. And say, if you've got any more questions, just let me know. There we go. Stop.